We are on the lunch break on the first day of questioning of the undercover police manager, Keith Edmondson. We finally now got to his time as Detective Chief Inspector of the SDS, joined by Evelyn Lubbers, the Undercover Research Group, and Donald Driscoll of the Undercover Research Group. What have you made of the evidence we've heard so far today?
He says a lot, but not. He's letting quite a bit of stuff slip. He's like a lot of the managers. He keeps not remembering anything, or I don't know specifics. But it's quite clear about what he didn't do. There's been a huge focus on relationships, and there was one moment where the Council of Inquiry read out the long list of relationships that happened on his watch, and just put it to him. And she's kind of not letting go on that point.
Yeah, and he doesn't stop saying that he didn't know. He didn't know. He didn't know. He is picturing sort of a really good team. He hopes he was kind to all his undercovers, and he talked to them a lot. And it's being put to him, what didn't you talk about sexual relationships? No, we didn't. And also he shared a room with Bob Lambert, who was manager of the STS at the time, and continues to say that he didn't know about Bob Lambert's history as an agent provocateur or having had relationships or fathering a child. He keeps saying that he doesn't know that, and then it's being put to him, wouldn't it have been good to ask about or to discuss relationships, because it was risk, wasn't it? Yeah, in hindsight, it would have been good, but we just didn't do it.
Yeah, and there's an amazing moment of lack of self-awareness where he basically went on about how good Lambert was.
He referred to his experience as invaluable. I mean, it was put by Sarah Hemingway after that. It's like, well, given that you've also said in your written statement that you had no idea, not only of the misconduct that Lambert got up to whilst he was deployed undercover, but also you've said that you didn't know what unit, what he was infiltrating, the people that he was targeting. How was this this experience invaluable? I mean, basically what it came down to is him going, well, I didn't know about it, and he seemed to, so. That was useful.
Yeah, he had his hands over his ears, and he managed to have his hands over his eyes at the same time. And one of the things about, he's sharing an office with Lambert, but Lambert's also on the phone all the time. Yeah, so it's not just, whether they talked about it, it's what he was hearing. It's like, what was he doing in this office?
Yeah, and then there is he finally admitted to the fact that it would have been a good idea that something would have been written down about having no sexual relationships. But before we got to that, he kept saying something about chemistry between people, and they were so close they were supposed to develop friendships, and something could happen. And then we're back to the sort of genuine feelings argument that Mitting put to Helen at the end of Friday, which is, after all that we've seen, is so incredible. And what I find incredible as well is that he was asked, did he see any of the evidence of the women or of other undercover officers that have been in relationships? And he kind of said, well, maybe one or two. So we are led to believe that he came here kind of unprepared, or didn't have the will to find out that everything that has been exposed in the press, how that worked out for the women involved. I find that hard to believe.
Yeah, he's been very inconsistent on those matters. He said repeatedly that he had never had any knowledge of any undercover officer ever having any sort of sexual liaisons whilst deployed undercover. And then when he was shown the section from the Tradecraft Manual, which he claimed he had read but couldn't remember, he said, there was one officer a while back who had a disciplinary over it, I think. It was a minor point, but it just showed how inconsistent and how contradictory his evidence has been. He was absolutely adamant that it was never discussed. He kept bringing up the fact that agent provocateur Don't be an arch provocateur was raised repeatedly, and he's seen it written down, and it's really important that was said. But they were never told not to have sex, but they weren't encouraged either. And these were police officers, so he doesn't believe they would have done it. But he's heard that they have done it because he's been following the inquiry closely. But he's only heard one or two of people who've given evidence, and he read something as well. He thinks, but it was in the press. I think I saw a video on the news. I mean, he keeps kind of wanting it both ways.
Yeah, his lies are all over the place. But one of the things that really comes through for me is just how much he is the classic special branch believer. You know, there's like he's one of the rugby players, well, clearly of that particular mafia. But you know, his training this morning says training came from when he joined Special Branch in 1971 or 72 and has not been updated. It was never updated. He was still policing in the 90s the way he was taught to police in the 70s. And with it, you have this absolute belief in Special Branch. He doesn't need to listen to all these other people because he's convinced in the moral superiority of Special Branch. And why would they need training? They were Special Branch.
Yeah, this what I said before, like the picture that he paints of like this really good unit of people who all liked each other and who talked about everything, but not about sexual relationships. I guess we get to sexism and racism later, and you already know that he's going to deny that ever happened. I find it, yeah, like you say, he's a very classical, and he seems he's irritated by the fact that he's being questioned about this. And he's and Sarah Hemingway is going over and over things again and again, also probably because she can't believe what he's saying and that he's denying everything. But he's clearly like, I did a good job. You know, why am I here in the first place? Not saying that, but that's the impression you get from him.
Yeah, it's he keeps coming back to this idea of it being a team. It was a team, and we all brought different things. I mean, just that point you were saying about him being a rugby player, I thought it was really amusing that it was put to him that HN88 had said that, you know, in order to get on in Special Branch, there were two main ways: either be a rugby player or through Freemasonry. And he was absolutely livid about this. And he said, oh, it wasn't HN88 who I thought had said that. Someone else said that as well. But it's not true. It didn't help me in the SDS at all. Yes, I was a rugby player. Yes, it helped me get on in the branch, but not in the SDS. It's like, well, I mean, like, he's so annoyed he didn't even really listen to what was said because he just agreed with it.
And it's this classic we've seen a few times with the evidence, you know, like people like Gunn, and, you know, and I love the ones who are really convinced of the moral superiority of Special Branch, because they do let a lot slip through in their indignation. And something that jumped out to me earlier was in talking about vetting. You know, it's just started talking about relationships. Well, if they had relationships, they'd have lost their vetting. You know, and it was as clear as that. It's just like, you know, because before it's like, well, would have affected them? You know, was one of the reasons why it was all secret. Thing. He was really clear they'd have lost the vetting. So you have a load of Special Branch officers doing behavior that would clearly have cost them their vetting to see top secret material, handling top secret material. What a professional unit.
Yeah, that reminds me of the things that he mentioned, that what qualities officers had to have to become a member of the SDS when they were looking for some. Loyalty was very important, integrity, you know, ethics, and it makes you think like.
Yeah, there's a list of 5 of which, you know, loyalty to Special Branch and integrity is like two of the clearest ones. It's like, but if you're failing on integrity, you know, and also you've got all the psychometric testing which was brought in by his predecessor. You know, one of its questions is integrity. Were you looking for officers who had no integrity? Because that's what it feels like.
Yeah, sure. It's like really weird.
We had a comment here from Catherine Quinn saying, methinks that Ladith doth protest too much. Hope Sarah is setting him up for a big fall. Yeah, absolutely. I think there was a number of items that Sarah Hemingway brought up, particularly around the way in which the management had oversight of where the officers were living. And it seemed very clear that she was talking specifically in the what we heard the questioning of Bob Lambert about Mark Jenner, and the fact that he was living with Alison, and the fact that he'd submitted a fictional layout of the flat, and that document, that file note that we saw written by Bob Lambert, which had an entirely fictional, entirely made up scenario for why he was moving. And Keith Edmondson was like, oh, yes, no, it would have been, the police national computer would have been checked. Absolutely. I like to think that it would have been done throughout. Yes. Like,
and that they walked around the area.
Yeah.
The cover, I was like, that was, for me, was a jaw-dropping moment. It's like, you didn't just give them cover addresses, you checked those cover addresses. Okay, now that's new information.
Yeah, and I think that, it's going to come back up again. There's been a few things where I think she's planted a few seeds. I mean, just quickly to say, I have been critical of Sarah Hemingway in the past. I think she's doing a fantastic job. Yeah. I think she really turned a corner when she was questioning Rob Harrison, and I think that she's really kicked on since then. And I was particularly impressed with her this morning. I think she really got Keith Edmondson talking about topics he didn't really want to talk about. At one point, he's not just a bit annoyed. He's visibly angry. I mean, he's been shaking a few times.
I wonder how much, the ones who've all got angry have all been questioned by women.
Yeah, and that definitely plays a part. At one point, he got absolutely livid. I mean, it was just about this point about the living arrangements. He said, at some point, someone asked me whether I went round and checked that they were living there. Well, that's a ridiculous idea. He wasn't being asked this, but he ranted about it for a couple of minutes. So annoyed was he that he had to kind of create up something to be annoyed about so that he could rage and not at the person who was asking him the questions. I think he's going to split up.
He was really angry. He was asked whether he did any management, basically. I sat in my office. I wouldn't have gone to see the officers. Outrageous. They were all special branch and did what they wanted to. Yeah.
He kept saying, oh, we talked about their deployments every day. Every day we talked about it. And I don't remember it being that Bob Lambert had operational control on a day-to-day basis. In hindsight, that might have been the case, but that's not how I remember it. And I mean, we were just seeing this. I mean, I'm reminded of what John Webb said about him, that he was naive and acted surprised by things that were obvious. And he really is showing that. I found it quite funny that, given that John Webb said about that about him, he called John Webb an amazing intellectual. So
having seen John Webb's books, I'm not entirely convinced by that. But yeah, he is. But he's in the office with Lambert, who we know is a master manipulator, perceives himself as a master manipulator, and likes playing games. Yeah, and you get the feeling that Edmondson was completely under his thumb, and he didn't have the brains to realize it.
I mean, he was such a senior officer by this point. I mean, by the time he's appointed as, and that was an interesting point. It was like, kind of, how were you recruited? He's, I don't really remember I was recruited. You have said that you were close family friends with Bob Potter, who was the chief superintendent overseeing the SDS at the time. Was that have anything to do with it? I like to think it wasn't. I don't know how I was recruited, but I like to think it was for my skills. Not because I'm a very good and very close family friend of Bob Potter.
And his skills in not asking questions. That's huge.
Right.
He's had this incredible, on B Squad doing Irish stuff. He's convinced that he was part of the polished elite of Special Branch.
I mean, you get the impression he'd been in the Special Branch for 24 years by the time he's put in as Detective Chief Inspector of the SDS, and it's almost like it's his turn. He's there for it's a 3-year deployment. They all get moved around a lot. By the time he's just come out of being DCI of CE Squad, and we saw a lot of the documents that he'd been shown before he went into the SDS. So he was, it was kind of his turn to do the SDS, and the fact that he hadn't been allowed to go and be an undercover officer 15 years earlier probably kind of was like, well, Bob sort of sorted out for him that he could actually finally play Secret Soldiers,
Yeah, I know he's clearly got this sort of image of himself that comes from the unit, but he's never. You get the sense that he's never had to question himself, and that's why he's irritating. He's polished himself up for years as this thing. It's like, maybe the shine isn't quite worth it.
No, and maybe to compare him with Bob Lambert, whose personality is totally sort of ingrained in the fact that he was SDS and had been its commander as well. Edmondson is more like classical special branch person who then did a bit of SDS as well and sort of tries to imitate Bob Lambert or to sort of have the same kind of character, but obviously he doesn't. He doesn't have that.
It's got to be quite a weird management dynamic where you have Lambert's boss being seemingly in awe of him. It's like, how do you line manage in that situation? That again is a quite poor management. And and if he is being naive, well, how many the other managers in special branch will actually stick him in there? He's not going to ask any bothersome questions. He's just going to let Lambert get on and do it. He's serving a function that he doesn't realize he's there to serve, which is basically to keep a lid on, not ask questions. I can't believe that all these other managers in special branch didn't also know that he was quite naive.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like it's pretty well known. I just noticed that there's 53 people watching. Only 6 of you have liked this video. Liking and sharing makes a big difference. Please help us spread this message as much as we can. We've got lots more to come from Keith Edmondson. He's back again this afternoon. He's back again tomorrow. Is there anything else you want to add, or anything else you're looking forward to hearing and being questioned about?
I hope indeed that they're going to, Sarah Hemingway is going to put up the pressure a bit, because otherwise, he will just be repeating himself this afternoon and tomorrow again, and that would be very boring. But if the heat's being put on, no pun intended, the weather outside, I hope he's going to let slip a bit more.
I'm curious to know how long he's going to maintain the I saw nothing, I heard nothing thing, because when Sarah Hemingway read out the list of relationships, quite significant relationships on the things, like we still got to get into all the criminality.
Yeah,
it's it's going to get to a point where even he's got to realize what actually was he doing, how that all this happened on his watch, how much control. There's only so much disappointment can go around for somebody who's the head of a unit.
Yeah.
I mean, it is very telling. His time ahead of the unit, there's only one officer who didn't have sexual relationships, although we know of. That's HN81, cover name Dave Hagen, who infiltrated the Stephen Lawrence Family Justice Campaign. So, I mean, like, there's like he's...
He had other things on his mind.
Yeah. All right, thanks for joining us. We'll do another one of these videos in the afternoon break and at the end of the day. Oh, there's another person's have to comment. I love the way he says he's been told not to keep talking and then just keeps talking. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he can't help himself. He interrupted quite a few times, actually, adding things that just made him look worse, as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
Very strange. All right, cheers. We'll see you all again this afternoon. Bye for now.